next on Another View on Health, a deeper dive into mental illness and its effect on the African American community. July is National Minority Mental Health Month, and over the past few Fridays, producer Lisa Godley brought the issue of mental health front and center through the stories of real people who made up their minds to ignore the stigma and get the help they need. On today's program, we talk with millennials who are determined to change the narrative from mental illness to mental wellness. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Another View on Health with my co-host, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby is next, so stay with us.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. According to the Mayo Clinic, mental illness is defined as a wide range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect your mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. Now, many of us have mental health concerns from time to time, but when those concerns cause stress and affect our ability to function, that's when it becomes mental illness. African Americans are 20% more likely to experience mental health problems than the general population and are also more likely to experience factors that lead to mental illness, like poverty and violence. On today's Another View on Health, we'll talk honestly and frankly about mental illness, its effect on the Black community, and what young people are doing to change the narrative from mental illness to mental wellness. Our guests include licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Angela Jones. Angela, how are you?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming back to be with us. We appreciate that. And Jordan Yowell, a sophomore at Savannah College of Art and Design and a former student with the Governor's School for the Arts and their Reframe the Shame project. How you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing great, Miss Barbara.
Oh, she called me Miss Barbara. I love it. And of course, we welcome my co-host on Another View on Health, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. So before we get started, you have some news you want to share with us?
Okay.
What's going on?
One of the important things we know is the need for blood, and not just being a vampire. Blood is needed in the healthcare industry. We see it every day. So there's a blood drive coming up, First Baptist Church, 418 East Butte Street. That's in Norfolk. That's going to be on Monday, July 30th from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Want to get people out to give blood. It's well needed. You know, even as a cardiologist, I don't have to transfuse a lot, but I do have to transfuse some patients. And I tell you, it's nothing worse than not having adequate supplies to save a life. So it's really important if I can get you out. If you have questions on it, please, you can call the Red Cross at 1-800-RED CROSS or call Reverend Evelyn Lee, 757-477-1716, or Pastor Gloria Newsom Brickhouse, 757-618-2953. And people that come to donate will get an Amazon.com gift card of $5. So come on out, get your Amazon gift card.
Absolutely, but it is really, really important that we give blood. So that is Monday, July
30th from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's First Baptist Butte Street. Now that is just for those who may not be as familiar with Norfolk, St. Paul Boulevard. You're right across from Scope. So it's right in the middle. You have a couple of churches right there, but it's the one in the middle. That's First Baptist Butte Street.
Absolutely. So come on out and support their blood drive. So we're talking about mental health. And Dr. Jones, I'm going to turn to you first. Why is it so hard for the African American community in particular to accept that the brain can get sick just like any other part of the body, and that mental illness is just that? It's an illness. It's not, doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean that there's a stigma, but it's an illness like any other illness a body could get.
Well, it all relates back to, you already said it, the mental health stigma. And these are negative views about people that are seeking mental health services. And so I believe that mental health issues have been considered a Caucasian problem in our community, and that is not accurate. As you already stated, when you are dealing with career stressors, economic stressors, maybe even cultural and political stressors in our environment, we are more likely to suffer from mental health symptoms. It's interesting. Most recently in practice, I've been seeing my African American clients are being referred from the African American medical doctors locally. That's how they're coming to my office.
So they're being referred. They're not coming in on their own.
Yeah, they like, look, they're being voluntold is what I call it. Now, you know, the African American MDs in the area like, look, honey, I know you might not want to hear this, but you might want to go seek some help for your stress.
And some mental health disorders manifest themselves in a physical way.
Absolutely,
also, right?
Absolutely.
Such as?
Well, you have depression. So oftentimes individuals will come to their medical professional and say, you know, I'm feeling exhausted. I don't understand. Maybe my blood is low. I haven't gotten out of bed this week. Maybe it's a physical problem going on. My appetite has decreased. I'm only eating one meal a day. I can't sleep at night. And so they're coming to their medical professionals with these symptoms, and oftentimes the medical professionals are saying, well, it could be a medical issue, but it may be a psychological issue.
So what does an MD, and Keith, I can ask you this also, what does an MD look for then to rule out the fact that it's physical and so they need to go see a Dr. Jones?
I think just having dealt with this a lot, is I get a lot of people come in with chest pain, breathing problems, and blood pressure elevations. That you look for a lot of variability in symptoms. What I try my best to not do is lead people down a path. If I'm trying to investigate a problem, as an example, they come in with chest pain, I can lead you down a path of asking certain questions so you give me certain answers back. And what I tend not to do, I want to let them tell me. If you make it an open-ended question, then when you start hearing things that don't sound consistent, that's a clue. Now, you know, one thing I've learned in life, everybody's ability to convey what they feel can vary. In other words, I could take pain in my chest, put it in yours and hers, and we all say four, five different things. You know, so some of that's with a grain of salt, but when you see a lot of inconsistencies in what they feel and time frames they feel it, then you start kind of digging a little deeper and you find out when they feel it under periods of stress or, you know, altercations with family. You know, a lot of times people will ask me, well, you know, why you need to know this? If I'm asking too many questions, I'm like, because I need to know you. If I don't understand you very well, I can't. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to help. Part of that's not so much to get in people's business, but to understand their background and the challenges they have, because that clues you in a lot of times to what may be a manifestation. Now, I think all of us as doctors, we take every situation seriously coming in. So we always look for the medical condition first. But if it doesn't look like that's playing out, if the test results are not as consistent or the story is not as consistent, then that's when you start saying, okay, then what are the other possibilities?
And also, to agree with Dr. Newby, we look at the duration and the intensity of what's happening. Some of the clients will come in and they'll say, well, when I went to Dr. Such and Such's office, I went in for a high blood pressure check, but I couldn't stop crying while I was there. And she became a little bit concerned about me. And so same thing with some individuals believe they're having a heart attack. And they'll say, oh, well, Dr. J, I've been to the ER 10 times in the past 6 months, and they keep telling me it's not a heart attack. And so when you start looking at the duration and intensity, it doesn't match what they're coming in for. That's another clue.
So, Dr. Angela, tell us if for someone who's never been to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you know, you have the Hollywood version of laying on the couch and, you know, telling your life story. What exactly happens when someone comes into your office to see you?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. I believe this is the answer that people don't understand about seeking treatment for mental health issues. Initially, I do what they call an intake. I am just getting background information on my client. I usually introduce myself, tell them a little bit about me. I'm finding out a little bit about you, tell them about the process of what therapy looks like, tell them about what a treatment plan looks like. And then at the end of the session, I allow my clients to hire me or fire me. And I always say that because I think it's important to make a good choice when you're choosing a psychologist or a therapist to go to. You need to feel connected. And so I give the power back to the client.
So you encourage them to ask you as many questions as you may be asking them. In other words, you're looking for a relationship between the two of you.
Yes. Now, I won't say that I allow them to ask me any questions, but I tell them a little bit about me to make them feel comfortable because again, when you're talking about in the African American community, there sometimes a boundary, a barrier to treatment is a trust issue. And so it's very important that they trust the person that they're sitting in the room with. So I do my best on the first session to give enough information about myself where they feel a little bit more comfortable.
Is there a need to also manage expectations in terms of when they're going to be better? In other words, treatment or coming to see you, you may have to come multiple times. You may have to come over a period of months, years, depending on what your illness is. So how do you help them to understand that just because you came once, that things are going to be okay?
That's interesting. One of the issues in our community, and I have seen an increase in African Americans seeking treatment, but one of the issues is that they're seeking treatment at the later stages of their issue, of their illness. So by the time they decide to come and see me, or by the time they're referred by their MD, they are in what I would consider like a crisis stage, or they may be headed towards inpatient at that point.
So they waited too long.
Right. And I think there's a misconception about what therapy is.
Okay.
If you are struggling, if you're having some issues at work, if your sleep has changed, if your eating has changed, come on in at the early stages. And oftentimes research will show that 8 to 12 sessions of therapy is what most people find the best results.
That's where I can chime in on this. The biggest obstacle we have is trying to convince people they need the help. That has been, I'm going to tell you, because I've been cussed out a few times, just even to hint that there may be an issue there. And people don't want to hear it. I guess it's the stigma of it is like, I'm crazy or this, that, and the other. And I've tried to say, no, you may have challenges that you may not know how to deal with. I said, my job is to identify that and try to help you at least see another possibility. I'm like walking on major eggshells because, for me, most of us in mass, we black and white. There's no shades of gray. Is this, is this, is this, is this. We know there are variations to everything, but even myself, it's like if I'm gaining weight, I don't need nobody to tell me that. And I'm not going to sit there and do the old adage, but doc, I don't hardly eat anything. I'm gaining 50 pounds. We are realistic. When I'm gaining weight, I know exactly why. I'm eating too many Twinkies. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And a lot of our conveyance is just black and white, but you can't do that because, you have to be careful how you relay this information over.
There's also this particularly for older generations, and Jordan, I'm coming to you because we're going to talk about the younger generation, but this whole idea of we have to be strong, that we have overcome so much, we can't give in to these small little feelings of depression because we've got to carry the family, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And
I think as a man we see that a bit. The reality is that we have to, as men, though, get over is we're not perfect. And that's one of the hardest things to get people. And sometimes, though, we use that as an excuse not to do something. So some of it, I think, is legit. Some of it's kind of just, some excuse kind of using because they don't want to do it. And
but you were also saying, Dr. Jones, that for males, the completion of suicide in African-American males is on the rise.
Yes, suicide across the board is on the rise. But when we start talking about symptom relief. One of the issues in the African American community and also with males is that they're internalizing and they're stuffing. So if you do not go seek treatment, if you do not go to someone weekly to express how you're feeling, to get these feelings out, to find a outlet, all of that is building up, and it's going to come out some way, in some way, shape, or form. And whether it's aggression, whether it's through substance use, whether it's through making an attempt on your life, making an attempt on someone else's life, it's going to occur. And so going back to what Dr. Newby talked about, 60% of individuals in our community who are facing depression think that it's just a personal weakness. That's a big number, 60%. And what I talk to my clients, my Black clients, and I say, you know, we should not be wearing suffering as a badge of honor. It's not a badge of honor. And, you know, sometimes we look at it as, oh, yeah, I can get through this. I'm going to push through this. Mm-hmm. Well, you've been attempting to do that for 10 years, and that's not working so well.
Exactly. And if anything, it's getting even worse.
Absolutely.
That's prime point right there. And that's, I think that's about as well said as you can do. If you what you're doing is not working, that means you're doing something wrong, and you may need to revamp that thought process and maybe come down a different path. I 100% agree.
And I
with you.
push the fact that embracing our spirituality, embracing mental health treatment, those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because a lot of times, particularly in the Black community, we'll say, you know, well, I'm just going to take it to God in prayer. I'm just, you know, and we're not denigrating prayer because that is very, very important, but it's also important to seek the professional help.
Well, God wants you to be active in your life. God doesn't want to just tell you to, okay, sit back and these things are going to fall out of the sky and just let things happen in your life. You have to be an active agent in your own life so we can embrace our spirituality and we can embrace, we need to be taking care of ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually. We go to church every week, don't we? Mm-hmm. Faithfully. We go to our dentist every 6 months. We're supposed to be going to our doctors on a regular basis.
We won't talk about that one.
So why wouldn't we go to get some mental health treatment?
Absolutely. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about mental health, and changing the narrative from mental illness to mental wellness, taking the initiative and becoming mentally well as well as physically well. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Now, Jordan, you are a sophomore at SCAD at the Savannah School for the Arts and Design.
Savannah College of Art and Design.
Okay, thank you.
Pretty close. That's good.
Okay, but you're also a Governor School student.
Governor School alum.
Absolutely. And there was an incident that happened at Governor School where students became pretty intimately involved with mental illness. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I honestly believe that we all go through these things in life and we face those things on our own, but then you're in this community. So we're all in high school, but it's a select few of us that actually leave our school in the middle of the day to go to Governor School. So then your circle gets even smaller and then you get broken up into departments. So you get really close with these people. I would say this process started sometime in 2014, actually. I remember I was really tired. I had this big backpack, so I took the elevator. We're not supposed to take the elevator, but the elevator actually started stopping on every single floor because, other kids were trying to take it. But one thing I noticed when the doors were open was just, in a sense, chaos. Not so much people running around, but just like emotion. Like people were crying, people were breathing heavy. And I was like, what has happened? And I finally get up to my floor and there's still nothing being said. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll ask around later. But to my surprise, the school immediately, they didn't want to just send it out in an email. They wanted the kids to be talked to by the people who cared for them, our mentors at the school. So a few moments later, everyone is gathered into one of our biggest rehearsal rooms, and they talked to us about how a student in the instrumental music department had completed suicide. I think it was the night before. And I know a lot of people were affected, not only outside of our department, but even if I'm theater, I would still take the bus with people from Suffolk who were in instrumental music or who are in musical theater. And then we have these crosses and we get to go see each other do our crafts. So I know he was very talented and a lot of people were really sad to see his passing. One thing our head of our department, Steve Earle, was talking about after it happened, was how tired he was in a sense, because not only was that had happened at that school, which we consider just this honestly heaven on earth, but inside his life himself, there had also been other millennials who had taken their own lives. And he was just like, I feel like from the moment we got accepted into the program, he starts referring to us as theatrical warriors. He said, if anyone, I think we have a power to do something pretty amazing to take care of this issue. Not only, we don't have to try to conquer the world, but we can talk to the people here in Hampton Roads. And from that came the project we called Reframe the Shame.
And Reframe the Shame was describe it for us and tell us what you all did.
So Reframe the Shame was a partnership between Norfolk State University, East Virginia Medical School, and Centera Health. And Norfolk State, their school of, I want to say the School of Sociology, the School of Social Work, they recorded these interviews for us. These people knew that we were going to take their stories and make adaptations of them. We were going to keep them anonymous, but we wanted to hear their plight of anxiety and depression because our goal was to erase the stigma of it. So they went in and they were recorded by the staff, and within a day of them completing their interviews, we got the transcripts and we were able to make a story out of everything they told us. And we were able to travel it to all these non-traditional settings in Hampton Roads. We did it at East Virginia Medical School. We did it at Norfolk State. We did it at, I think one time we just did it on the side of the road and kind of this little promenade. And I believe we went to ODU. And it's just like, I tell people all the time, you can be in theater and your parents come and see you, and when the lights go down, they're like, oh, that was so cute, applause everywhere. But when we finished Reframe the Shame consistently every show, it was like people stayed in their seats for a little bit. Like they wanted to take what we said with them. Like it was just like nothing I'd ever done before.
What would they say to you after the show?
A lot of people honestly thought the stories were ours, like the cast members, because the characters had no names, so there was nothing you could judge upon. It was just like I could have been doing the adaptation of a white female, someone else could have been doing the adaptation that a woman originally said. We were all just taking the words that we related to that felt the closest to us. A lot of them would of course open up about people in their own lives who had completed suicide, and that was difficult to hear. But to say that, wow, like I didn't know, because one thing I think we had over like 20 interviews, but one thing that was similar between all of them was that people feel the same way. And I think that's really satisfying for them because originally they feel like alone in this situation. So I think just giving people that sense of being one of many instead of one alone, I think they really appreciated that.
So now that you're at SCAD, you're staying away from home, you're in the dorm, so forth. Do you and your peers talk about mental illness? Do you talk about mental challenges and deal with issues such as suicide and others? I believe
so, especially in the theater community, but even outside of that, I feel like it's just becoming more acceptable to talk about these things because what we look towards when we watch TV and we watch sports, as much as for better or for worse, I think celebrities or famous people have a good impact on our lives. So if people are on their Instagrams or they're talking, they're like, hey, I've dealt with anxiety, but I still do this. One of my favorite actors on Broadway recently did like a Broadway vlog, and almost every vlog she would end talking about how she felt about her body dysmorphia and things like that. And I was just like, wow, you think that people that accomplish so much can't go through things, but they do. And so we'll talk about that. Sometimes when we cast characters for shows, we had someone who was bipolar who was in the show, and he was just like, I'm coming forward with you guys with this now. I want you to know about it. So like, forgive me. And it was just like, yeah, like you're a fantastic talent. Like, thank you for telling us that. You weren't obligated to, but he did. So I think it's definitely going up and getting better in the future.
Dr. Jones, is that healthy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I myself, I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder at age 40. And after many years of practice and diagnosing people with attention deficit, here I am being diagnosed with it. Wow. And so one way of fighting stigma is to stand and be transparent about the things that we do. And I let my clients know, I started going to therapy in my 20s. And so I'm very transparent. These things impact all of us. It doesn't matter of your race. It doesn't matter how many degrees you hold. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. We're all impacted. And so when I'm out speaking to the communities, when I'm speaking to different churches, workshops, I'm transparent, and I will come forward and say, therapy has been outstanding for me, as far as understanding myself and knowing what I can do best to assist as I go through life.
And do you think, when Jordan was talking about how the students come together and talk to each other, then Jordan, do you all encourage each other to, if you see someone that may need some help, would you encourage them to go to, you know, to the health center or to get some help somewhere?
I feel like that if one thing that might be something we can work on. I think I remember Mr. Key saying earlier that, you know, you still, even as kids, even if we're talking to people our same age, we feel like we have to walk on eggshells. It's more, you know, you can come to me about anything, right? Like, girl, just hit me up. Like, we'll talk. We can talk all night long. It's more like that. I'm welcoming your issue, but I haven't yet to be in a conversation where someone's like, maybe you should go talk to a therapist or something like that. I feel like I would even have trouble, in a sense, telling someone that, because I don't have a license. I feel like it might be out of my place, but I think it's definitely, I know it's something that people need, and I know friends can't handle that for you. So you do want to, I guess we have to be taught the manner on how to do it, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, the recognition is really tough, because, you know, somebody that says, I'm having an issue, a relationship issue, you may not think that person's going to turn around and shoot everybody and kill himself in the process. And it's hard to identify somebody's state of mind. So just, to make that comment, I totally understand where you're coming from with that statement, because it's hard to know who, the severity of somebody's feeling, because especially when you're not a trained, because even as a MD, I couldn't do what you do for a living. I know I couldn't. I don't have that training nor that expertise to be able to recognize to that level. So it really is tough for somebody that's young to be able to encourage somebody else without knowing, really how do you identify those individuals more.
Whether it's that serious or not.
And another, she's right. You have to be careful about how you word it. Sometimes I'll say it may be helpful to get neutral feedback. Mm-hmm. You can go to your best friend, or you can go to your aunt or uncle, but the feedback is not neutral. Yeah. The feedback is biased. And what you need someone, oftentimes the way people can wake up and recognize their issues is when someone they don't know says, hey, I noticed this. Yeah. And she's like, wow, well, my mama, my daddy, my sister, my brother told me that, but I didn't.
But I didn't pay that any attention.
But you don't know me, and you said it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's important to have that neutral person.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about mental wellness in the Black community with licensed clinical psychologist Dr. Angela Jones, actress Jordan Yowell with the Reframe the Shame Project, and my co-host on Another View, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Jordan, you told me a story prior to the show about a student and who had a friend who was having some issues. Can you share that story with us?
Yeah, to piggyback on the effect of you can always call me. My phone is always on. I'm here for you. We've been rocking since the second grade, yada, yada. There's always going to be, I think we try to avoid shaking our own walls. So if something is happening and, your parents can be stressed about money, or they can be trying to figure things out themselves, you don't really want to, open the dinner conversation with yourself thinking you might have anxiety or depression. So it's easier to talk to people who are friends at school. One unfortunate story I had heard from a friend of mine was how he had a friend who was dealing with all of these things, and they were close. He said, call me whenever. And the dependency on him became so much, to the point where he left his phone on in the middle of the night. And so if she called, he was sure he could pick it up. When she wasn't at school, he was worried about her. He stopped focusing on his schoolwork because he felt like his main priority was keeping her alive, in a sense. And I guess the one good thing about it is you feel this temporary relief, like, okay, I got that off my chest. But at the same time, this young man isn't going to be a psychologist. I feel like as a psychologist, you're not only probably trained to take care of other people, but how to take care of yourself. And so he wasn't trained in that, so he started to feel very guilty. And eventually, I think after they had corresponded for this long period of time, she did complete suicide, and he ended up having to start therapy himself because he couldn't shake that guilty feeling. I know that I have these two best friends come to my birthday party since I was in second grade, and if I was ever going through something, they wouldn't turn me away. They'd be like, call me. Or if anything happened, they'd be like, why didn't you call me? And I think one of them is even studying to be a psychologist, but that still doesn't mean that they have what I need. So I think it's, if anything, for a word of caution for millennials, like, I know it's so much easier to go to your friends and not shake those walls, but sometimes you need someone who can teach you how to break through the walls yourself, I guess.
Dr. Jones, what does a family member need to do? How do family members cope and with someone within the family who has a mental illness, especially if they won't go get the help that they need?
Well, we need to be, first of all, having a place for them to express themselves openly. Sometimes the children I work with, they'll hear their parents make statements about, why is she going to that therapist? She should go to church. So they're overhearing these statements, or they might know mom suffers from depression and she's heard these statements. Oh, well, I'm just going to go get the self-help book and maybe this will do the trick. And so we're picking up generational responses to this cultural issue. And so the first thing we need to do is start having open dialogue about what's happening in our families, rather than, I think Dr. Newby was talking about the shame and the secrecy in our environments. Again,
let's not talk about what goes on behind our closed doors.
But again,
walls.
these things are genetic. We're talking about depression, attention deficit. These have genetic factors. So sometimes when I sit down with these families, great-grandmother was depressed, grandma committed suicide, uncle is depressed, but he's abusing substances, so he hasn't been diagnosed. And you don't want to give the history because you don't want the family to, quote-unquote, look bad. But that is the information that the client needs to seek the help that they need. So we need to be having more of an open dialogue and a supportive environment. What do you need?
The toughest thing that I would say that, and I may get in trouble for a couple of these comments, but bear with me. One of the things that troubles me most, and I see this in medical practice, is somebody will come see me for a health-related issue, and you start a treatment strategy. They come back the next time, and treatment strategy is gone. What happened? We didn't talk about this. Why'd you stop? Well, my friend told me I didn't need it. So I'm like, well, who's your friend? Help me understand. And the point of caution is that when you're talking, what I try my best to do, be it my children, my wife, whomever I'm talking to, is to be as neutral in my delivery back to them, to listen, not necessarily always comment,
right? Because
you can get in trouble by rendering your opinion, which really people don't always want your opinion.
Exactly. Sometimes they just want you to listen.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned with my wife. She used to get on me about saying, I'm not trying to ask you to fix my problem. We work on this thing where you fix issues. I just wanted you to listen to what I had to say. Mm-hmm. So I've had to learn to do that. And I caution people out there, family members, whomever, because when you tell somebody, take it, you should just be in church, which I agree with. As a deacon of mine, I totally agree with that, but that's my faith, which may not be somebody else's. So you have to be cautious with that delivery of your particular feelings, because you can shame that person away from even seeking any help at all.
By giving your opinion.
Yeah, by giving that opinion. So you just really have to be careful with that.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Nicole joins us from Norfolk.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Hi, I have a quick question. Great topic. How important is it for children to seek a counselor after a life-changing altercation, divorce, death, things of that nature?
Great question. Dr. Jones. Thanks for the call, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole. This is Dr. Jones. I feel like is extremely important. I think sometimes, especially when there's nothing tumultuous happening between the parents, they seem to think, oh, well, we're co-parenting fine. John doesn't need to go see anyone. He's not showing any symptoms. Well, just because he's not showing any symptoms, especially in male children, doesn't mean that he doesn't need someone to express his feelings to, doesn't mean that he doesn't need to check in with anyone. And so whether it be still conflict happening within the home, I would recommend the child go be seen in individual therapy where he can express himself openly. Because oftentimes children don't want to make things worse. And so they won't tell their parents how stressed they are about the divorce, or they don't want to disappoint their parents, and so they don't want to say certain things to their parents. So,
or they may feel that it's their fault.
Absolutely, that's usually the case. And so, I would recommend any parent, any life-changing event, whether it's changing schools, going from middle school to high school. Any of these things would be outstanding for a child. And again, therapy, you may only go to therapy for 2 or 3 sessions where the therapist says, oh, Miss Jones, John is doing fine with his adjustment. He seems to be doing well. There's no harm in just checking in. And if he's fine, he just does 2 or 3 sessions and gets some great best practices. And it doesn't have to be something serious. Like I said, we wait too long. We wait until the teacher pushes us to go tell John to get some help.
And by that time, John has
right. He getting ready to go to alternative school at that point. Yeah.
Patrick joins us from Portsmouth. Hi, Patrick. You're on the air.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, doing good.
Great. Yeah, my question, I wanted the panel to address some of the cost of mental health treatment and what are the economic barriers to access. Okay.
Thank you so much for that call, Patrick. Dr. Jones?
Wow. I was just reading a statistic recently, Patrick, that stated that 15% of African Americans are lacking with health insurance. There's a lot of changes happening locally. So some people don't have access. And as far as I know, when you do not have insurance, those clients are referred to Community Services Board. And the CSBs are totally overwhelmed in our communities. There's often a wait list for services. What I've been reading most recently is that they're overwhelmed with the long-term treatment because people are waiting to get treatment, or they don't have access to the immediate and on outpatient, and so now their beds not enough beds for the people in long-term treatment. So it's kind of like a trickle-down effect. I've been seeing a number of my clients who their insurances have changed, so they may have been able to come every week, but now they can only come once a month because their insurance co-payment has increased. So it's a big issue within our community. And again, when we start talking about the suicide rate, I'm concerned that this may be a result of people not having access.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Gary joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Gary. You're on the air.
Hello, Barbara. I'm actually a board-certified physician from the military. I've heard you guys many times say, God. That's true. People do need to speak to God, but they also got to remember God can't write a prescription. One of the biggest problems we have is the armchair physicians saying, you don't need this, you don't need that. What we really need is more of and I'm not saying Me Too as in the abuse, but that does fall in there, but the Me Too issue. Even I have PTSD from combat and stuff. It's more of the prominent people, example like you or that board. I heard one of them, your own board there, say they have issues. Are more willing to say, I have these issues. It's not something to be ashamed of. Is a big thing. Because right now we're still stigmatizing it because we call everybody snowflake, which really makes the issue even worse.
Wow. Yeah, I hear you, Gary. Thanks so much for that call. I mean, he brings up the point that we have to be proactive, as you said, Dr. Jones, earlier.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I want to talk about, too, within the African-American community, well, all communities, but particularly in the African-American community, and that is the PTSD that's brought on by violence in the community, and particularly for young people. Coping skills. What and do we think about what children, adults, and anyone who lives in a situation where they see violence a lot and how that affects them?
What I've noticed is that oftentimes people don't even understand that they've been through a trauma. So when I ask questions in my intake interview about, have you ever been exposed to verbal abuse? Have you ever been exposed to physical abuse? Have you ever been exposed to sexual abuse? They don't know whether it's abusive or not. So
because it's so normal, as someone told me once?
Absolutely. It's been normalized. And so oftentimes I have to operationalize what I mean when I say abuse. And folks are shocked. They're surprised. And so if you don't even know that you've been through abuse, you don't understand that you have been traumatized. And so it's just a lack of knowledge, lack of information about what they've been through. So of course they're not seeking treatment if they don't even understand that they've been through a trauma, and that someone who's been over in Iraq can have the same response as someone who was raped at 15. So again, it's really about the education piece, which will contribute to getting the best treatment.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about changing the narrative and talking about mental wellness and what you need to do to take care of your brain as well as much as you take care of the rest of your body. Chris joins us from Newport News. Hi, Chris. You're on the air.
Hi. Again, Barbara, always a great show.
Thank you.
I just have great shows. I have a question for both of the doctors. If you've had some parental and child conflict, what is the latest age that you can still do family counseling if your children are over 18?
Oh, that's a great question.
Hey, you can do family counseling from the cradle to the grave. I mean, you can do family counseling at any time.
But what you're saying, Chris, is you can't make your child come once they're an adult. Is that what you're asking?
Not so much make them, but I didn't know if there was an age when you talk about health insurance. If your child is 19, they're willing to, can you still do family counseling and the insurance still cover it?
Absolutely.
Yes. I think part of it depends on the plan you have too,
right.
And that's where I'm finding where the rubber meets the road is just the plan. But I think if it's included in there, I don't think there's any age
No, there shouldn't be any age restriction as long as your coverage will cover them coming in.
Yes, it's no age restriction. It's no age restriction as far as I know. And usually the only issue is to get the adult kids to show up because the therapist can't force them to come. So
when you do family therapy, then is it individually and then everybody comes together, or how does that work?
Well, it depends. Oftentimes, especially when I'm working with teens, I'll do individual work with my teens just to establish that rapport. You really need that with the teenagers for them to start disclosing what's happening with them. And then I ask them, is there anything I can do to help bridge communication between you and mom or you and dad? And they were like, well, hey, Dr. J, I've been really wanting to talk to them about this. And so I said, okay, well, let's come up with a plan so we can have a session with mom and dad. So usually with my teens, I'll start out individually, and then we come up with our plan as to how they will present the information to parent. Now, again, it's great having me in the room because how they might respond at home, they may not respond that way in front of me. And I'm able to maybe clarify some things or help redirect. And so sometimes it starts out individual to family, and sometimes depending on what the issue is, it starts out with family.
Jordan, we only have about 4 minutes left, and I want to come to you. Is there a stigma among the college students that you're aware of, if someone is in therapy? Do they talk about the fact that they are actually going to a therapist?
I do not believe that anyone who is seeking help is ridiculed at the college age. I think the only stigma there might be is that if you make that switch from high school to college and you're overwhelmed with all the paperwork, it's that's just first year stress. I know my first year was a challenge. I actually ended up going to see therapy towards the end of the year because I was this is a new phase of my life. I need guidance. Let me go to someone who can counsel me in that way. And it was one of the best decisions I had made. Like, so I don't think there's going to be any kind of ridicule for you if you do decide to seek help. But just know that, you know, when you go into that new phase of life, that there will be challenges for you, and there's people who are so willing to help.
Are you guys encouraged to hear the young folks talk about the fact that they're willing to talk about this?
Yes, I'm excited, and I have been seeing more millennials come into therapy than I had seen previously, and so that makes me feel optimistic.
Mm-hmm. I am. Oh, we have a question for you, Dr. Jones. What are your thoughts on the new movement of therapy, Skyping or texting? In other words, this new thing of using technology as opposed to coming in and seeing you personally.
I embrace it. I think that any way we can start providing services that would make it easier for individuals to make the connection is, and again, we're coming into a new age, so we have to continue to move forward and make other options for individuals seeking help. Mm-hmm. Now, I am old school, I guess. So when you start talking about confidentiality and these type of things, you have to make sure those things are covered. But I think it's outstanding, and we should continue to move forward in our technology.
Okay, we got some more phone calls to get to. Let's see. We're talking to Audrey in Chesapeake. Hi, Audrey. You're on the air.
Hi. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good.
So I guess I'm really excited about this issue. I've actually attempted suicide several times. My last time, my parents had no idea what was going on. And because of that, I did get treatment, and I realized that my father really has PTSD. So I wanted to ask the panel, especially for our older generation who have been a part of violence, who have seen violence of some sort, either from their parents or just the environment that they were in, how do you kind of connect to them and say, hey, like, this is my issue, it's genetic, and I see it in you too. Like, what kind of conversation can I have with my family so that they understand that I'm suffering, but I'm not suffering by myself. We're kind of all doing it the same, and I want my family to get help the same way I've been trying to do the same for myself.
Wow. Can I ask you, Audrey, just before I let Dr. Jones answer you, what triggered you to go get help? You said you attempted several times. So what was the thing that made you say, I'm going to go get help instead?
Funny enough, I was actually in the middle of getting help. I was diagnosed with PTSD probably a couple of months before that. I was on a prescription that it had increased my suicidal thoughts. Mm. And after I was admitted into the hospital, I realized I didn't have much of a choice. So I kind of had to start talking about it, but I've had a lot of really bad experiences with psychologists and psychiatrists. So I think that also has a lot to do with my parents as well. Yeah. But it's like the doctor said, I had to find somebody that I was comfortable with, and it took a very, very long time.
Wow. Okay, we're going to let Dr. Jones answer your question. Thanks for calling, Audrey.
Thanks, Audrey. What's really, you just talked about a connection. The best way to get this information out and to get people to understand is for them to connect with somebody that they see as like-minded or somebody that's similar to them. So if you're talking about a veteran who suffering from PTSD, won't acknowledge that he has an issue, the best way to get him to start seeking treatment is for him to connect with another vet who has been through something similar, and they are in treatment, have had treatment, or they are open to treatment. Mm-hmm. So it's more about a connection with someone who they trust and they respect that their opinion on it, or they think that they understand them. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you need a different messenger that they can connect with, because they're not going to take the message from, they might be tired of hearing it from one other source.
Okay. Did you want to answer that, Dr.
Yeah, I 100% understand. I hadn't thought about it that way before, and that's a good idea, because that's one of the biggest things, getting the older generation that are already setting, the terms of people set in their ways to get them to open up, to see that there may be an issue. So I'm going to have to keep that in mind myself.
Okay, Sean joins us from Portsmouth. Hi, Sean. You on the air?
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm a recent retiree from the military. While I was in the military, I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, depression. I now get my treatments through the VA, and when I go to the VA, it just seems like they're trying to get me out of there as fast as possible. They just give you your meds, and and that's it. And every time you go, you seem to see a different provider. So I was wondering if the panel knew anything that was available for veterans, any programs specifically for veterans.
Outside of the VA, you mean?
Well,
Yeah.
I know that for us in the medical world, meaning like cardiology or primary care, that the VA is now allowing you guys to see outside your physicians or providers, given the fact that there's such a backlog. So I know that is available, so you can seek private, help.
Well, but Sean brings up a very good point. And Sean, thank you so much for the call. What is the best way to find a provider? I mean, do you just go to the phone book and look up somebody's name? Do you get referrals from family and friends?
Honestly, I still say I think word of mouth beats any ad, any newspaper article, any radio broadcast. Is just word of mouth. You ask people who've had other experiences what their experience was. I think we still look at that. For most doctors or providers, that is still the number one thing. Because if a friend of yours trusts somebody,
right,
that's going to be more apt to make you do that than if it's somebody you just go to a phone book. I think sometimes you can start by phone book, but most people would use the internet. They'll look somebody up, and then they'll search that name and see what other people may be saying about them. But I still say somebody that that they have sought help and gotten help, and you find out what their experience was. I still say that's the best thing to do.
And Dr. Jones, if I came to you and you and I sat down and we just didn't click, what is the proper way then for me to say, can you refer me to someone else, or, or what do I do if because we were talking about why this connection is so important?
Yes, as I stated earlier, I tell my clients to say, Dr. J, you're fired. And I let them be empowered. Again, everyone is different. Some people like they will prefer a younger therapist. Some people prefer a therapist of another race. Some people prefer a male over a female. And so you can, right at the conclusion of your intake session, you could say, Dr. Jones, I appreciate your time today. However, is there a list of providers that you think would fit is based on what you've learned about me today? And so you could get a referral right in that moment from the therapist that you're seeing.
Okay.
And I recommend them move forward as quick as possible to find someone that they connect with. But I do take veterans. I have veterans that do come to see me individually. So that's for Sean.
For Sean, who called in. Yes, definitely. Well, the bottom line is we need to make sure that we go get help. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Dr. Angela Jones, who's a licensed clinical psychologist, thank you so much for joining us. Jordan Yowell, who is a student at, say it again, Savannah.
The Savannah College of Art and Design.
Thank you so much. And always, Keith, thank you so very, very much.
Enjoy it.
Lots and lots of information to pass along to your family and friends. And the easiest way is to download the Another View podcast at anotherviewradio.org. And while you're there, please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. We're on Facebook, and I sure would love to get our likes up to 2,000. We passed the 1,000 mark. We passed about 1,500. So let's keep that going. And can you help us do that? We appreciate it. And I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. Next week on Another View, it's an Another View history lesson, the story of the Hayden School in Franklin, its rich past, and how it will serve again in the future. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Janae Jackson answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. A quick shout out to my granddaughter, Patience, who is visiting me in her Pop Maxi this week, and she's in the control room. Thank you, everyone, so very, very much for listening to Another View.